good? Afternoon, good evening. I would like to call to order the 2022-2023 City Council Redistricting Committee to order Thursday, March 30th, 2023, 3:46 p.m. Ms. Crichton, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Bennett?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Randolph?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Present.
Ms. Guerrero?
Present.
Councilwoman Johnson? Councilman Jones?
Here.
Councilman Warren?
Present.
Councilwoman Logan?
Present.
And Councilwoman Easter Thomas.
Present. Thank you. You all, we had a very engaging and lengthy discussion on last committee meeting, looking over some mapping possibilities that the mapping subcommittee had put together and toiled over. So I definitely want to give another just thank you for your time of engagement to the mapping subcommittee and the communication subcommittee. Just for being able to do the due diligence of the work and then also coming here and explaining to everyone what that looks like in real time for that. So I do want to just reiterate kind of what we decided on last meeting about the Chairman Jones special call meetings. Depending on what happens today, we have a special call meeting on next Wednesday, April 5th. And then another, depending on how things transpire, we have our city council meeting on April 11th, and then a third meeting, which would be the second special call meeting on Wednesday, April 12th, again at 4. So if that is the case, we'll be able to get legally the amount of readings required before the deadline for the Shelby County Election Commission so that they can do their things with diligence and fidelity. Yes, Councilman Warren, use your mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was reading the letter from Attorney Wade and looking at what that letter said. It said we had to have 3 readings at regular council meetings. And since Attorney Wade's here, I'd like to ask him, does that mean our special call meetings will count as regular meetings?
Attorney Wade, you have a question has been summoned by Councilman Warren. Did you need him to re-ask it? No. Okay. Anywhere you feel comfortable.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I thought I addressed this in the letter. I guess you were referring to my letter to the
yes,
chair
sir.
lady. All right. The charter requires that no ordinance shall become effective until the same shall have passed at least 3 regular meetings of the council and shall have received at each meeting a majority vote of all members composing said council, and unless the same shall have been published as now provided by law.
Mr. Wade, can you bring the microphone a little bit closer to you?
Yes, sir. Be glad to. And in section 43 of the charter, the pre-home rule charter, it provides that the city council shall hold a regular meeting every Tuesday at 2:30 o'clock in the afternoon or at such other time each Tuesday as so designated by resolution, provided, however, no meeting shall be held at other than 2:30 p.m. except on 14 days' notice. And that language, at that time, the council was meeting every Tuesday. And if you changed the time, you had to give 14 days notice. We have, okay, and then I'll just go further. The Home Rule Charter provides that the council is authorized to establish by ordinance the Tuesdays of every month on which the council shall meet, provided that the council shall meet not less often than twice each month. And then it says it's also authorized to establish the time and place by resolution. At that time, when that was adopted, we had several chairs that wanted to take meetings into the community but could not do so, and that's why we added that language to allow you to change the location by resolution, but still ordinances had to be adopted on a regular meeting. And there's no provision that calls for special meetings. We've always looked at that language in the prior charter. It says that except on 14 days' notice, as allowing us to do special meetings, but no ordinance could be considered at those special meetings, only resolutions. I think we did one recently. It may have been a special meeting for the Carlisle Hotel, but we were considering a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with them. I do not recall ever doing a special meeting where we adopted an ordinance. At some time, the only time that I recall that we did not approve the appropriation budget by June 30 was one year where there was some low sales tax collections in the state, and we couldn't balance our budget. We continued our budget until July, and then at a regular meeting approved the budget ordinance. So it's consistently been the practice and policy of the council to adopt ordinances at regular meetings. Now, I was asked last week by Mr. Bacchus. He called and said that the chair wanted to call special meetings, and I said, he asked me, he said, can that be done without approval of the council? I said, what do the rules say? So he pulled out the rule. I didn't have it in front of me, but he read it to me, and it basically said, let's see, where is that section? It basically says in Rule 51 that special call meetings, that the chairperson of the council may call a meeting of the council upon reasonable notice for the discussion purposes or consideration of any item the chairperson deems pertinent, but such meetings shall not be considered an official, nor can any official binding action be taken by the council at any such meeting. As many as 7 members of the council may petition the chairperson to call for a meeting, provided, however, that the same restrictions as to official actions shall apply. And then if you go to our rules dealing with meetings, let's see. I apologize for not memorizing all these, but I think there was a rule that addressed when our meetings would take place. Let's see. I thought there was a rule that addressed regular meetings occurring on the first and third Tuesdays. I can't find it right now, but I'll look for it in a second. So to address your question, it was my expectation that in response to the chairlady's question that I gave her a response to her question, what is the procedure to allow for an additional county council committee meeting and full council meeting to give possibly new revised maps an opportunity for 3 readings? And I basically went through this whole thing and said that you can try to use special meetings, but I believed that it would, but any ordinance adopted in special meetings as one or more of the required 3 readings could be challenged in court. So I think it's going to be somewhat suspect to have 3 regular readings before the end of April under the schedule that you have now.
Madam Chair. You know, that in my mind says that it takes a lot of the rush off of what we're doing, and it's going to allow us to have more time as we move forward with this for public comments, because we're not going to be able to get this done in time for our next election. So that means if what we're doing is we're actually doing this and we're taking it out to the public, we could actually have a meeting in every one of the districts that we're proposing to change and get public feedback there. That may be a good thing. But I hate to see us push something through and then have it challenged in court, and then what we're trying to do, make something that is open for the public to have comment on, now have it suspect because people are suing on it because we pushed it through against our rules that we have in our charter. So I just want us to keep that in mind as we're moving forward, and I'd like to hear comments from my colleagues about what they think based on that information. Thank you.
Councilman Jones.
Thank you,
Chairman
Madam
Jones.
Chair. Sort of at a loss of words. I appreciate those regards, Councilman Warren. But I think that at a minimum, if we have suspension of the rules all the time. I'm not, everybody knows, I'm not a lawyer, but we have Ms. White here, and she could read the same charter, she can read the same rules and ordinances, and can come up with a different opinion. So I think at a minimum, we should go through this exercise. I want to apologize to you, Councilwoman Easter Thomas, for the period of time that I stepped in as chair for not having more priority to this, because, colleagues, we asked for this in the beginning of 2022. And so it was only before, and we were, didn't know that we had to do anything before the election. So if anything was rushed, Councilman Warren, it was the one that was put before us before the election. And we, for the number of meetings that we've had, that has been the most public meetings, to my recollection, that the Memphis City Council has had for redistricting ever. Unless, Mr. Wade, you can tell me that the process has been different.
I don't dispute you.
Okay, so this has been, so to have more meetings for the sake of having it more transparent and not rushing it, I feel that what we've done has been, the most has been done along those lines in probably 3 decades. So with that, I would still say that we're doing this with the understanding that it can be challenged. Yes, Mr. Wade has provided that, but because to me, when I read the opinion, it was vague at best. And like I said, Ms. White could read it and come up with a different opinion. Our colleague, Mr. Smiley, who's also an attorney, can come up with a different opinion. And so as long as we have different opinions and interpretations of it, the only one who can decide that, if it is challenged, is going to be a judge. And I think that we go through that process as opposed to not doing so because of what we didn't do in the most transparent process that we've had for redistricting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Before we go to Councilman Warren, Mr. Moore, hold on, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Moore, did you have your hand up? Okay, let me write that down. Warren, Mr. Moore, and Johnson. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Jones, for that. No apologies needed. We all working as a team going as we go through here. And as you said, when I read it as well, I took the position of what we established last meeting was okay to do. And so just to put out there, if we do, I think we should go ahead and go through what we came here to do today. And if it is allowable, Attorney Wade, you can let me know that whether because I think a quorum of 25 is considered what, 13? Right. And so Councilman Smiley, let the record show that Attorney White is here. Councilman Smiley said that he was on his way earlier. Is there the opportunity to move it to with no recommendation?
I think you can. I think that would in essence be another linchpin that would be missing if a court were reviewing it. But I think all I was trying to suggest to you is give you the lay of the land, the rules that in the charter that we should all know, and just say, look, if you want to press ahead, go right ahead and press ahead. But understand there are going to be some problems, some bumps in the road if you do so.
Okay.
And I'm agnostic about this whole thing. Whatever y'all want to do, y'all do it. And then 7 members of the council will decide where we go from there.
Yes, but definitely thank you for, one, your presence and also your opinion there and then too. And that's what I'm thinking, just to be transparent on that as we go forth. But Councilman Warren, Mr. Moore, and then Councilwoman Johnson.
You know, while Councilman Jones, while I definitely appreciate that different lawyers have different opinions, I think that one of the things we've done as a council is we have pretty much recognized that Mr. Wade has been our expert on the charter and rules and regulations of how the city works. That being the case, I think what he just said is he did not think that proceeding with special call meetings would stand up in court if it was challenged, and probably would likely be challenged. So as I think we go through whatever process the chair here wants us to go through, Councilwoman Easter Thomas, but I do think that it's not necessarily a bad thing if what we do is we delay the initiation of this long enough, because we've had this open, but if we're going to take it out to the districts, because we've heard from people on our committees, we haven't taken these things, we have 3 community meetings, and they're going to be sort of coming up really quickly, like in April, 1st, 2nd, and 8th. So we haven't had one yet. So in my mind, I think it's still going to be hard. That's 3 places in our city. How many other places do we need? And it's within a pretty limited time frame. So we can see what we need to do, but I'm not sure that moving forward at this time rapidly is going to behoove us when we look at the lawsuit down the road. And I'm not sure we'll get 7 votes worried about that as we move on. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Moore.
My question is, and I understand the election commission, but how much time did the council have when they okayed the map between the last year?
Ask that question one more time, Mr. Moore.
I know what he's asking.
Okay.
I get it. I think we adopted it August 22nd, and if you recall, we didn't have a result. Councilwoman Swearingen didn't resign until shortly after she was elected. So there was no way we could know whether we were going forward or not, but we were prepared to go forward. And it was adopted on 3rd reading on August 22nd, signed by the mayor on August 25. And I believe the later part of September was the qualifying period for people to pull petitions and submit them to run for the special election. So that was probably more than a month ahead of time. The April 15 day is about the same that we had before.
The April 15th day is the same as you had before when it comes to city elections. But putting this off, having the right number of meetings, the election commission still can do their job and have an election in October.
Was that a question?
That was his opinion,
Okay.
I think.
Well, I guess in the form of a question, if we go through with this process, can the election commission still do their job, or do they have the right to refuse anything that's put out past the April 15th date? I'm turning his statement into a question.
I'm just telling you, I just gave you what they said, that they needed that time and I don't know why they needed to deal with their vendor. And remember, you've got people pulling petitions. So after you get beyond that period of time, you start changing lines, you're going to have a firestorm of potential candidates coming after you, saying that you're trying to, I mean, we've had this happen before. That you're trying to position yourself for reelection and ignoring people that's trying to run. So, I mean, I don't think you want to get there. But you'd have to address that to Linda Phillips. I don't know exactly all of the ins and outs of what they do. And I think the lawsuit, if you decide that they refuse to accept what you did as being untimely or incorrect or whatever, then it's up to somebody to sue them. We wouldn't be getting sued. You'd have to sue them if you wanted it to go forward.
Chairman Jones, we had Councilwoman Johnson and Dr. Harris. Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you. My question is very similar to Mr. Moore's question. Are you telling me that April 15th was the drop dead date from the Election Commission?
All I did was pass on their letters. They gave y'all a letter in January saying that you had to be done by April 15th. And then I was asked to ask them again, and you got a second letter saying that date was firm.
What would be the chances of someone going over there and talking to the Election Commission and getting that date extended?
You're welcome to do it if you like.
Well, I mean, if somebody
I've talked to them and they said, absolutely not, firm. Listen, I tried. I'm just passing on their answer.
You're the best. What you mean you tried?
Well, you know, I've had stuff turned down by y'all too.
Okay.
I'm not
But that's what
infallible. But I tell you what, to piggyback on what Mr. Jones said, I don't recall. Did y'all watch that Miami game against who'd they win? That Miller guy. He was 7 for 7 and 13 for 13. He had a perfect game. I don't think a court has ever gone against my interpretation of the charter. Now maybe.
You're good.
The chancellor in part 3 might do so on the mayor's thing, but I doubt it.
Was it TCA? Was that TCA or Memphis City Schools now?
Chairman Jones, you next on the.
I'm not
okay.
But
I think we did all right on that one when we settled it for like 10 cents on the dollar.
I think that prior to Wednesday of next week, somebody needs to go and try to speak to the Election Commission to see if we can get an extension. Being that said, we will have 2 meetings in April, and we only need 1 meeting in May to get to 3 regular council meetings. So if that could possibly be done, but at least you know you tried. If not, we can proceed with your special election and see what happens in the meantime.
So, Councilwoman Johnson, do you think that should come through a letterhead from the redistricting committee itself to the election commission, or what form are you thinking about?
That would be good, plus a personal visit. You know, you're going to need to go over there and talk to them. I mean, I'm not in charge, but I would suggest you in the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
The ones that hadn't spoken yet, I'll go after
Okay, Mr. Harris, and then Mr. Randolph.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dr. Harris, I'm sorry.
I just have a question, and it may be a dumb question, but let me ask it anyway. Can the election legally compel the city council to go with a map that they don't want to go with, for lack of a better phrase? If the council says they would like to submit A, but they need another week to submit A, and I guess what I'm hearing is the election commission is saying, no, if you don't get A in by a certain date, then we're going to go with B. If the council wants map A, can the election commission legally compel the council to go with the map that they have not selected?
I'll punt that to Attorney Wade since he's here. I think he answered that. But I'll let him answer it again.
Dr. Harris, if you gave them maps the day before the required statutory date for issuance of petitions for potential candidates, and they physically could not change their shape files in time, what do you think the answer would be? It would be physically impossible to do it. And they wouldn't be choosing anything. They don't choose anything. They don't make decisions. They don't give opinions. They take instructions from us, provided we provide it to them in a timely fashion. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Attorney Wade. Mr. Randolph and then Chairman Jones. And also let the record show that Councilman Vice Chairman Smiley is with us. Thank you. Mr. Randolph.
My first question is, when you go to the election commission, is that decision going to be left up to Linda Phillips, the administrator of elections, or will it be left up to the commissioners on whether we could get an extension? And I would volunteer to accompany the delegation when they go.
Think you were ready to answer.
I would have to acknowledge that Mr. Randolph has had a lot of experience suing the election commission, albeit unsuccessfully. But it probably will be a decision by the election commission itself. Although under the state law, which I have researched very carefully when I represented them against the county, the administrator of elections has plenary authority in terms of administration of the elections. So I think, and I don't know, you'd have to talk to their lawyer, okay? I'm not representing them and giving opinions about how they operate, but I do know she has considerable power.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Randolph. Chairman Jones.
Councilman Warren and Councilwoman Johnson, think about this for a second. I want you to contemplate this. Let's say that we're looking at that April 14th again, and this sort of goes back to your point, Councilman Warren, if we do push it past there. This really affects, in a sense, primarily, well, it affects both, but I'm thinking about it from a candidate standpoint. So let's say that the people that will pull petitions will still live within what their boundaries are today, even if we change it. You follow me? So the ones who might be affected by this might be somebody who might be on the edge and one precinct may have changed. But let's say that that does not happen. And they still pull a petition for where they live after that. And you know, this still is all about opinions at this point until the judge rules that. If they still are in their district, they pull and almost, in my estimation, even file. They haven't been harmed by us putting in this change, whatever change that may take place, even if it's in the second week or the second meeting in May after that, what we call that 3 original meetings. So I guess I'm of the opinion that if we do go down the path that we do 3 readings, I just don't see how the election commission, based upon the filing of those petitions or when they come out, will not have enough time to do this. Because if we're talking about April, here we are, April is a whole 6 months. Knowing that there are other dates in there, being the filing deadline, like I said, the voters will change in a sense, but I think that those that, where the quote unquote harm comes in is not to the voters, it's to potential candidates. Look like your wheels are turning, Mr. Wade, so
I
you
just,
see where I'm going?
okay, let me,
Maybe I'm missing something.
listen, I'm talking to you,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Easter Thomas, Johnson, and Warren.
And
Not the
Logan, too.
not the rest of y'all.
And Logan.
And Logan, I'm sorry.
And Smiley.
Y'all are and Smiley. Y'all are council people. Okay. If you look at Dr. Harris's maps, he's been very judicious in making sure that y'all aren't affected. Y'all little names are on there. He ain't moving you out of your district. Okay, so mechanically, until you have the maps in their shapefile, they cannot verify petitions. The voters are critical knowing where they live. If you have a petition in somebody's name, they go through and say, are they in the district? Okay? Until you get that done, it can't happen. But you know you won't be affected because he's not going to cut you out. So if somebody gets cut out indiscriminately, who's going to catch the heat for it? It's not going to be these unelected people. It's going to be you. Okay? And I'm your lawyer. I'm just telling you how it rolls. All right? I've been there before. Now, if you're willing to step up to the plate and take the heat for somebody being cut out, fine.
As someone who is not affected by this, yes, I am.
Of course. Of course.
Yes, I am.
So it's mechanical.
Okay. So even from a mechanical standpoint, though, if we're talking about a July 22nd some odd filing date, if I pull in May and then I realize that I'm in a different district, the one that's harmed is not the voters. It's me as a candidate. And so it's incumbent upon me as the candidate to sue the election commission, not the council. So from that standpoint, colleagues, we still can go through, whether it's, like I said, up until that filing date or filing deadline, not the day which you pick up petitions. So if I'm in 4 and then it happens to become 6, that hypothetical person who might be a candidate, as long as it's by that July date, have they been harmed? That we get it in there. So for me, and I say that to say that April 14th day, to me, is a moving target. I'm just like I said, I'm not the lawyer here, but what the election commission is saying is that they are needing to do this by the certification or verification of these filing petitions. Well, we got to July. Somebody who their district right now may move into 6. They may pull on May and then realize that in June they have to pull 1 for 6. But that's not upon us and hampering anything that we're doing that we want to have from a district line standpoint for really not just for this election, colleagues, for the next 10 years.
And Chairman Jones, I think the point you're getting at is when we looked at the whole concept or process of redistricting maps, we aren't making maps for candidates or ourselves.
Well, I can say that.
We're making maps for
right, for the next 10 years.
For the next 10 years for the voters. Okay. And so thank you. Oh, Charity left. Thank you, Charity. Mr. Blankenbeckler.
In that letter that you guys received from the election commission, they stated that it was because of the process of incorporating your changes into the system. If you do decide to go talk to the election commission, please invite me along with you, because it may be possible that the city can provide them with a format that helps expedite their updating the data, which might buy you that extra week that you need in order to get your 3 regular readings.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Committee members, I would definitely like we can sit on what we just discussed, but I do want Dr. Harris to go through these 3 that'll be decided or not decided upon today. Why are you looking like that?
I'm just laughing.
that'll be decided or what have you, what we get to towards the end of the meeting. But you all receive these in your emails, and then also Ms. Cole passed around these to everyone as well. So you should have 3 pieces of paper that have maps on them. One says City of Memphis Council Districts Proposed. One says 2021 to 2023 City of Memphis Super Council District Changes. And then the third says 2021 to 2023 City of Memphis Council Districts Additions. Okay. So now that we have those all 3, if I'll give Dr. Okay. Once we get to that, I'll give Dr. Harris the floor. As you need to make commentary or ask questions, definitely nudge us, let us know, and we can do that as it goes along for a whole discussion. Councilman Smiley, you got maps? You need any? Okay. Okay. It's the same one. Yes, sir. So, and you still got the floor, Dr. Harris, whenever you're ready.
I'm sorry, I'm just, my computer is locked up. All right, it's unlocked. So let me open up by saying that the names of the council folks are on the maps, and I can't remember a time when council incumbents were redistricted out of their district. So while that wasn't the first issue that I looked at, obviously because we're dealing with communities, it's already an issue when you change potential precincts and or districts. And I wanted to ensure that when we were doing this, that not only did I wanted to limit the amount of people that would be uprooted, but also representatives as well. Now, I'm not necessarily legally obligated to do that. So when I started with this, I started with a blank sheet of paper. In fact, if you look at the, I don't think you have these, the first map that I showed the committee was radically different from what you have now in place, and pretty different from what I'm presenting now. So I started really radical, and we've just sort of progressed. I wanted to show everybody, you know, what the different iterations could do and what the ramifications would be as we went through that process. So I want to make that clear, that I did not, you know, sort of draw these with necessarily with incumbents in mind. But I will be honest, I did overlay the council members, just as kind of a QC on not creating a problem for the communities. Because if I redistricted someone out of their district, the map passed, not only would the member would be affected, but if the people in the public had become accustomed and wanted to be represented by somebody, then that would have created some sort of harm for them, so to speak. So I just want to make that clear. The map you see here, and I put this on the screen, this looks a little different than the map here, which is more detailed. And the maps that you have are more detailed with overlays of changes in precincts. What I have here is sort of just a raw map of single District 8. Single District 8 is really a combination of all the meetings that we've had and the changes that have been requested and the concerns brought about not only from the community, but also from members of this committee, which also happen to be council members. So that's where we are. The first thing I started with was population, equal population, okay? The second thing I looked at was, are we diluting minority voting strength? Third thing I looked at was compactness, contiguousness. Now, obviously, you see that big donut hole in the middle of Cordova. Can't do anything about that. Now, I talk about the de-annexation and some of the complexities that creates. Let me take my hat off to Mr. Wade. If anybody's gone through this process and been doing redistricting, and of course, Scott, this is a headache in the city. I worked on the county redistricting, and I thought that this would be easier because in the county I couldn't split precincts for county commission district and of course the Senate district. But because of the way some of the blocks are, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well, and what has happened as a result of de-annexation, that makes this a real pain in the neck. In fact, had I known it would be this much trouble, I probably wouldn't have volunteered to do this. So let me get back on the subject. When I talk about those principles that I use, and you guys have in that evaluation form and rubric that I provided, the next thing that came up was communities of interest and trying to keep as many communities together as possible. Now, people don't live in chunks of 90,000 or something, so that complicates this a lot. If everybody lived in communities of 90,000, we'd all be happy. Everybody would get a district. Generally, everybody would be just about happy. One of the things I looked at here, just like I looked at on the county side, was the Cordova area has been historically cracked up in the county and also in the city. One of the things I wanted to see is there a way to be able to put as much of what is considered Cordova that's in the city back together as compact as I could do, knowing that I would have that donut hole there because of de-annexation. And what would that look like in terms of population? Would that meet the rule? Would that meet the test of one man, one vote? And obviously, if you look at any one of these districts, they are stretching across. The current map stretches across to pick up population. So if anything looks sort of weird, as I showed you all in the last 3 or 4 meetings, and I think I'm going to show this. I'm going to just do a little rewind to show some of the folks that haven't been here. The shapes of the precincts and the proportionality. They are neither symmetrical or in a lot of cases proportional, which makes this extremely difficult. So when you see these funny looking shapes, a lot of it is really just the animal called precincts. As I talked about, being able to use census tracts, blocks, and or precincts, and precincts are obviously the easiest way to do it. When you're trying to redistrict, those shapes are going to look funny, and that raises questions. Spatial data can be very misleading when you're looking at this because you cannot necessarily tell how many people are in a different area. It's easy to sit here and just say, why don't you just move this over there? Why can't you just move this back there? And why can't you do this over here? It's certainly not that simple, and I think I showed you guys a demonstration the last 2 meetings of just what happens as you move stuff around and the ramifications on keeping the population equal. So on this map, we put together as much of what is considered Cordova, North and South Cordova, that was still part of the city and was not part of the de-annexation. Obviously, we had to move part of that down to pick up population. So if that little tail looks funny to you going down, And I would challenge you to sort of look at the screen, because the maps you have are all inclusive and they've got overlays of super districts and stuff. So this may be clear for you to be able to see. And also I can move my cursor around and bring this up and look at streets, because I know people are always concerned about communities. So we were able to do that for the most part. And then we had to add population down on the southeast end. Now, this is what would be considered a new District 2. It's actually not that radical to what we have today, other than the north part of what's considered Cordova is connected to the south part of what is considered Cordova. Much of the sliver going down the southeast side was already in District 2 under the current map. It's not exactly the same, but it's generally, it includes some of the stuff. The biggest difference would be this pink area here and these precincts here. Those would be the differences. This and that, these were all part of the district, and the southern part of Cordova made up District 2. So yes, there were some changes, but they were not, at least in my view, radically different. Obviously, radical is in the eye of the beholder, and when you're doing redistricting. I think the biggest, most radical change, at least in this map, would be Councilwoman Logan's district. I looked at this, and I've always wondered why we had to take this district all the way across I-240, all the way out to near the East area for some time. And I've always been a critic of that. I've always felt like we should be able to put more of Raleigh back together, so to speak, and put more of Cordova back together. So when I started this, obviously it wasn't perfect. I had questions from Dr. Warren about that district going down into near where Sam Cooper is now, but that was solely to pick up population. So I know there were some questions about, how that would split up a community and do some other things, but I tried to put as much of that back as possible without affecting the integrity of the population numbers in the district. I'm going to stop for a second. For those that have not been here, particularly Councilwoman Logan, everyone else has had a chance to slap me around a little bit about the changes. So I want to give you your opportunity as well.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your work and everyone here. Even though I may not have been here, I've been keeping up with what's going on, and I do think that it's smart to put Cordova together, because, however, North and South Cordova are just totally different, basically, and so it really doesn't matter in terms of whether it's with the former District 1, well, the current District 1, or the new District 2, it's still going to be different. And so but then when I look at the part that has Raleigh and the part that's south of the interstate, those are different. And so I was trying to understand what were you going for?
Primarily, where it says Berkeley there, I did split some precincts. In the original mapping, I didn't split any precincts. I just went straight. So I did pull some blocks out. And what I was trying to do, again, the precincts are neither symmetrical or proportional, which makes this extremely difficult. So I did pull some blocks on either side to try to create some symmetry between the Covington Pike area, and to pick up population, because the goal was to try to keep as much of one on this side of the expressway and not spill over into what is North Cordova, so to speak. And so I had to pick up population. That was one of the reasons I did that. And I did pull some blocks or split a precinct or two to be able to do that so that I could keep some of that together. Now, the Election Commission is probably not going to like that very much. There may be some questions that come up, but that was the rationale behind it. I think whether or not this meets the standard of the Election Commission or this would meet the vetting of Attorney Wade as well, that's got to be meted out. But the rationale behind it was to sort of try to bring those communities back together as much as possible with the constraints that we have to work with in terms of precincts and population, et cetera. So I was trying to keep as much of that on one side as possible. So that's kind of what I did there. It's not necessarily ideal, but the precincts preclude you from making ideal maps. And every time you move one thing, you end up moving something else. And let me also say one of the other considerations that I had, and I brought this up and worked on the county, that there's a concept called cracking and packing. One of the things that I was trying to do is also keep in the back of my mind that we try to, as much as possible, move away from the packing of minority groups into geographic areas on one side, and then the cracking of those same groups on the other side. I've seen that on the county, and that was one of the impetus. That was really the main impetus to take a look at trying to bring those communities down. Now, it's not perfect, because the precincts drive you nuts. Okay, you're all over the place to try to make that work, but obviously we've seen some population decline, but there's also a shifting in District 1 and District 6. I mean, they just can't fall off in the river. They've got to be able to move. And I know there are other communities in between here that are trying to keep their, I want to say, geographical integrity, for lack of a better phrase. The problem is that we've got population that we're required to try to balance, and we've got, I guess, population geography to work with. We've got racial geography, which complicates this as well. And so we're trying to balance all of that and try to give you the best, I guess, sausage we can come up with at the end. So those are that was kind of my thinking. Again, I started out with a blank sheet of paper on the maps, and we worked in here, and I even let them watch me actually do it. And they saw the constraints that you run into when you're doing a pure precinct sort of mapping, and there are trade-offs. Obviously, I talked about Councilman Robinson took issue with some things that I had changed. Dr. Warren had some questions. Chairwoman Thomas has some questions. But also there were questions that came from the community as well about why are we splitting them up? Why does downtown have 2 representatives? You know, why does Cordova have essentially 5 people representing them? If that could be condensed somehow. So anyway, those are just kind of the thoughts behind my head. 8 is a combination of all those questions and changes and recommendations from this body. I know there was a lot. I just wanted to be comprehensive.
Thank you.
Councilman Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could maybe pick Attorney Wade's head a little bit, can you explain to me how we got to the concept of our 2 super districts and how they were set up and what was that purpose?
That was an outgrowth of the 95 litigation. That was a settlement by the existing council members, all 13 of them. At the time, if you remember, we had 6 districts had 7 single districts and 6 at large citywide. And the issue was the runoffs in the citywides that was deemed to be violative of the Voting Rights Act because black candidates could never win those positions. And so the white candidates, the white council members proposed this solution out of 13 various proposals, and it was adopted unanimously by the council.
Why could the black candidates never win those positions?
There were a number of reasons. I think a lot of them were contained in an affidavit filed by Jesse Turner Jr., who the NAACP was a member. It was also largely because of the expense of running a citywide election, name recognition, incumbency, a whole lot of different issues. And he identified a number of people like Janet Hooks and other people and why they won and why their people lost. So those were all explained in the lawsuit by an expert, and Jesse was providing his viewpoint, and I thought it was pretty. He looked at a variety of different reasons why people won and people lost, and I think there are a lot of reasons, but it just historically it never was, black candidates were never able to win those races.
In those races, was on the super district or the at-large, were those at-large races and they didn't have runoffs?
After the remedy, the runoffs were eliminated from the 2 super districts. And basically, the way it was done, you divided the city in half, and you were pretty much guaranteed, the black candidates were guaranteed 3 super district positions because the population was such that it was more than 70% African American in Super District 8. At that time, the population was relatively equal, and that meant that the 3 positions of 9 were pretty much safe in terms of white representation. The other 7, you had 4 that were more than 70%, and therefore you ended up with a 7-6 majority, and that's how it proceeded up until the present day. Now we have 8.
Okay, thank you
And
very
let me
much.
talk about that one. I think Dr. Harris said, I don't know why that tail was there.
So they weren't, so was one of the things they were looking at the split between African American and Caucasian voters?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want us to take a minute and look at these maps and look at the population densities that we've got here. Currently, I think in District 9, do we have about a 50% Caucasian and 50% African American, or 40-40 and 20? Is that the split there?
Yeah, based on my recollection, the current map that's been adopted has 40-40. And then you have other, which I think is the other 20. And so, I mean, it's roughly, that's declined from the previous numbers in 2011, I think was the last election. Oh, no, 2015 was the last election, wasn't it? 2019. So right now, I would say if you didn't do anything, you have a reasonable likelihood that you could pick up another African-American position in 9.
We almost had that in our last election, as I recall, by 500 votes. But I'm looking at the way the population is splitting out now in 9. And instead of being an equal amount, you have 115,000 Caucasians and 146,000 African Americans in 9 with this split. And I think that comes from the way Cordova has been recombined. So by doing that and changing what we've done at the top, that's given us that split. And if you look at the other districts, what we have is District 2, in the past has been about 50-50 or close, and that's actually had a Caucasian representative for a while. It's now 34,000 Caucasians and 38,000 African Americans. So we have one district, it's District 5, and that's 60,000 Caucasians and 17,000 African Americans. So if you're talking about packing minorities into an area, seeing the Caucasians are the ones, the minorities in our city now, that's sort of a packing situation. So I'm wondering as we move forward with this, how we unpack it. It doesn't seem to me like that's really doing anything other than actually almost guaranteeing that we potentially have one Caucasian representative on our council as we move forward if we go with these numbers. So it's an issue that I think we need to think about because we want everybody represented, and I think it's something that would be unfair if we move forward and definitely could be at risk for challenge. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, may I just say one thing?
Attorney Wade, yeah.
My position has been that I wanted y'all to present the council with whatever your recommendation is, and then we can evaluate those issues that you have at that time. I don't want to prejudge or opine about anything. I just want to see, you put it in front of me and then we'll start looking at it. I think right now we start picking things apart before you get there. I don't think that accomplishes anything.
May I address that?
Just have one other thing. I have been asked by constituents in my district that if there's any way that Central Gardens can come back into 5, They would really like to be in 5 because
That's packing more.
That's packing more. That's packing more.
How
I'm
many
just
more
saying.
you gonna pack?
I'm just saying. Yeah, that's what they're saying.
You packing all the white folks in 5.
That's what we're doing.
I'll talk to you about that
Unpack a few
whenever
out east.
we get to the.
Dr. Harris,
So
back
let
to
me
you.
address, notwithstanding. So if you look at the different iterations of maps that have been presented, there were also maps that came from the community. And if you look at a couple of those maps, there was a map that was presented sort of by zip code. And it basically split Midtown up into 3 pieces. Depending on how you draw the map, you can draw a legal proportional map, north and south, just as easy as you can east and west. We've generally done north and south for quote unquote areas that are African American and sort of east and west when it came to 5, so to speak. So there's no intentional packing in 5. In fact, in some iterations that I worked on that I did not present, 5 would have been more African American. But the more you move things around, you may or may not necessarily like the outcome. So let me just say that first, and mostly I think I've used the word racial geography. So we've got a lot of different things, and in that evaluation form, I talked about proportionality, contiguousness, compactness, communities of interest, trying to keep communities together as much as possible, political boundaries, all that's in there. Midtown Popular Corridors historically been a community of interest, so to speak. We don't necessarily have to draw it that way, and I think I could only say be careful what you ask for, because I think the end result would be something you wouldn't like. It wasn't done intentionally, and as for Central Gardens, that Central Gardens was already in there. I didn't do anything different. Central Gardens, or 13-7, was already in the current map. I think anytime, and I think it's just not with this body. I think legislative bodies tend to look at their districts and their precincts with a John Decide when we're doing redistricting. I had the same issue with the county. Anytime you move a precinct or 2 around, it appears that you're getting gutted somehow. But what I tried to do was spread the pain and the pleasure around as much as and fairly as I could, with that, and trying to keep the integrity of the overall proportionality. Because the first law of this is proportionality, not what somebody likes in their district or a precinct in their district. And it's very hard to do that when we're pressured to move precincts in to achieve even a community desire, if that desire goes against the overall interest of proportionality citywide. And I think that's the complication that we're running into.
Councilman Warren, you okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. At this point, any other, because I do want you to move on to the super district map. Anything else? Councilman, Chairman Jones, and then Dr. Harris, you're gonna move to super district map.
So if you could, Ms. Logan, I'm glad you're here. One of the things that, and I've tried to look at it as agnostically as I can, because I don't have to run again, but sharing some of the same themes that I've talked about universally is having, communities. I've advocated for downtown having one single member district representative. And then the same thing for the Cordova area, still recognizing that North Cordova, South Cordova, you have some differences there. But I just want to get, because you're here to speak for yourself, sort of your ideas and thoughts on having what would be a compact district, because to me it made no sense for your district to start its most western bound right at Councilwoman Easter Thomas' district, running all the way out to the county line when that area was still part of the city.
Sure. Initially, well, probably when it was first drawn, and somewhat today, the areas were similar, even though they were, spread out. Mm-hmm. They were similar in makeup, and to some degree still are. North Cordova and East Raleigh, from all the way over, it's kind of similar in terms of the population. There are drastic differences within each area, but they're still similar. So I could see how, because I lived in both. I've lived in both, and it wasn't hard to move from one to the other. It was almost just like moving down the street, And like I said, there are drastically different areas in Raleigh, and it's the drastic difference in Cordova. They're similar. So I could see how that would happen, but I do know that North Cordova is a lot different from South Cordova, and a lot of times South Cordova, they don't necessarily want to be connected with North Cordova. It's like, we're in South Cordova. Like, that's a different Cordova. But, a lot of people say that, and they really mean that. And so bringing them together, however, I understand it, wanting them to have one representative, but it's that representative will just have to bridge that, because they're drastically different.
Well, and thank you for that, but, and although I'm just looking at it, I guess I'm sort of looking at it geographically, just that wide span. The same thing could be said for Councilwoman Easter Thomas if we're looking at what would be the difference between downtown and Harbortown and North Memphis and Smoky City, all of the communities there. So, mine still is, it's almost looking at it from maybe sympathizing, if you would, with who would be the candidates running in those particular areas. I saw one of those super district maps in some of the, there was one super district map that took Super District 8 almost into, going across what would be District 7 into your district. And so I looked at it and said, boy, somebody who has to run that race to have to cover that area, that would just be nightmarish for them. So that's, trying to keep them sympathizing, somebody who doesn't have to run, sympathizing with what would be the expense having to do so. And that could eliminate a good candidate who might not have the resources in order to campaign in such a wide geographic area when we're talking about a super district. But I'm still having that same thought of somebody who's campaigning on a single member district level as well.
Can I give you some historical context? That district was originally, I think it was E.C. Jones.
It was E.C. Jones.
E.C. Jones.
And then Morrison. It was predominantly Caucasian. That tail came about in 1998 when we had the Tiny Towns lawsuit that went all the way to the Supreme Court. That tail came about, we annexed that on the Countrywood Eads to go all the way to Fayette County because that was our path to keep from being blocked in and surrounded.
Gotcha. Okay.
That was why that happened, and those candidates that ran basically ran with synergy among the population as you're talking about, and that's historical, and she's inherited that, and I think she's done a hell of a job pulling that all together because she came in a predominantly white district at that time and won it, and from my opinion is pretty much commanding it at this point. And I'm saying that to all your opposition, incidentally. So I mean that's why that happened, and I think it's somewhat ironic that you mention what you say, because there is another council member who has an expansive geographical area as well that has wanted to do something about it. But remember, and Dr. Harris can speak to this, you don't have a whole lot of options because you got to go contiguous.
Right.
And so Councilwoman Robinson probably has the largest geographical area and has complained a lot of times about, I've got to go all over the place, And you talk about diverseness between Whitehaven and Hickory Hill. I don't even need to talk about that, but that's the kind of thing that happens when you have a city of, 300 square miles? I mean, it's just the way it is. So the natural solution might be to go to 13 single, but we can't do that yet.
Right.
So, I mean, speaks to what Dr. Warren was saying. You may be able to correct a whole lot of issues if you go to that, and maybe, y'all can push this thing to see where it goes, but ultimately you may be better to really do a long-term planning process to try to get to the 13. So that's kind of where I am. But we can talk about all this when y'all bring it in-house, and we talk about all the iterations and the history and the whole 9 yards. Yeah, y'all do whatever y'all want to do, and then we'll see where we go from there. And
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, if I've got a deadline in a really big case for the city, and county sued us for $40 million, and I've got a deadline to meet by tomorrow. If I can be excused, I'd appreciate it.
Are there any other questions for Attorney Wade? Wow. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wade,
Sure.
for being here today. Ms. Bennett.
It just seems to me every time that there is a concern about a group of voters, I'm just going to say what the elephant in the room is from my perspective. It seems like we, and I'm saying we just because as a community member on this committee, are prioritizing preserving the status quo of power in Memphis. And that typically lies with white and or middle upper class voters. It just seems like every time that there's a concern about a precinct here or a district line here, that's the message I hear every time, that the prioritization is for those who have traditionally and historically had the financial and every other aspect of power in this city. And I think that to me, that's the elephant in the room. And I think we need to name that because we have 5 white council members. If you look at the census data, that's not reflective of the city, So I just want to name that elephant in the room. I think things can be litigious for you all, not so much for me as a community member. So I will say it as a community member, that that's the elephant in the room. How do we protect those who are most vocal, typically, about what happens politically in this city? So I'm just saying that on behalf of those who are not white and no longer probably not middle class either.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. And definitely that's why I'm glad we were able to have community involvement and engagement, because you all bring a perspective and a piece to this important discussion that we're all having around redistricting and naming those things that we may or may not see on the council, but giving it a name and a place within this discussion. So thank you for adding that. Thank you for adding that. Dr. Harris, and we're trying to get out y'all with keeping this, but Dr.
brief.
Harris is going to be brief and then go through super district.
I'm gonna go through super
and then I'm going to call
Super
for
District 9. Let me also just quickly discuss about the whole South versus North Cordova issue. One of the things that I'm trying to also look at and protect the council from is an issue with dilution of minority voting strength. The areas of Cordova, both North and South, are becoming more minority majority. And we're bumping up, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV. I hate Mr. Wade was not here. We want to not run into an issue with Section 2 of the VRA. When I talked about cracking and packing, that's exactly what we ran into in the county. And if we've got an area that's now becoming minority majority, and we're allowing it to stay split up to achieve other redistricting goals, that may become a liability for the city in the future. So I was not only looking at today, I'm trying to draw maps that are more have more elasticity to them that will stand the test of time over time. Looking at the shifting of populations while trying to maintain as much of the current communities as possible. So I want to say that. And we're mighty close to this issue by continuing to crack up areas when they have a population to support a district. Super District 9, I think there was a question about changes in the Cordova structure and how that affected the Super District. I'm sorry, Super District, this is called Plan 7. It does not, all of Cordova was already in 9 in the current map, so it doesn't affect it. It does change some areas near, I'd say the Raleigh-Fraser area, where the current Super District map, Super District 9, sort of snakes up into that. So I just took a different approach. And I think I mentioned this at the last meeting. I'm trying to balance the proportions and the populations, but also not dilute the vote. So I know there was a question about are we packing like white voters in a particular area and how that would affect white voters. I just want to be clear, that's not what we're doing here, but we got to have a balance. If we look at the actual census numbers, there was a decline in the population numbers. There's also de-annexation all over the place that has occurred. And so between the de-annexation and the decline in white population, that's actually what's driving these changes, not anything special I'm doing. So I just want to make that clear. We can draw a super district that doesn't necessarily go that far in the city and reach our population goal. I did that in front of y'all at the last meeting. I showed you we could do it. Unfortunately, that would basically knock out Dr. Warren from his seat. Again, we wanted to keep not only communities together as much as possible, balance population, but also respect political boundaries as well. So that's kind of what we did here. This was more like I want to say a compromise from other super district maps that I showed you. In those maps, I did a lot of splitting of precincts because I was given the authority by this committee. But when I went back and looked at it, I said, well, maybe for a super, we shouldn't have to split precincts as much because there's enough geography and people to go around. So I didn't do a lot of that. I did straight precincts. It does look different. The demographics are a little bit different, but it's not anything magic I'm doing. The demographics are different because the demographics are changing and they are shifting. And it just kind of is what it is. And I know something came up about single member districts a minute ago. Really, if we don't like what's happening in this process, whether it's Attorney Wade or whether it's me or whether it's somebody else, then we can look at a community-based mapping system that goes more toward communities and which would tend to lean to a single member district, 13-member district. Again, I'm not pushing that. I know I said that in a couple of meetings, but if everybody's concerned about their areas, their communities, how their folks feel, how the community feels, then that may be something to look at. But for now, this is what we got to work with. So this is 9. Not a big radical change from what you have currently on the super district. Not a whole lot. There was some changes in demographics, and I think those were brought up by Dr. Warren, but much of that was just population shifts. And I didn't continue to try to racially gerrymander the map. Now, when I say racial gerrymandering, I'm not accusing anybody of doing that before. There is geographical gerrymandering going on based on where people live. And we live in race geography, so to speak. So that's what we're working with. It is what it is.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. You all, I am going to, well, one, I just want to, on the wrap up. So is it, you want to?
I just was going to ask a question about the map.
Okay, go ahead.
If you look at where you've got the changes in 8 and 9 on this map, and you flipped them, and you left the top part in 9 and kept the bottom part in 8, what would the numbers look like?
Dr. Warren, I've been looking at the data so much, it's got my eyes crossed. The data would probably change some, but I don't know the exact answer. Let me say this too. I want to put this on the record. One of the things I found,
because the top part's historically been in 9.
Right.
And that bottom part has not been in 9.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, if you flip that, what does it do as far as numbers concerned? Because I'm not sure why you're changing those two.
Well, I'm kind of just redistricting. I mean, that's why I said there were some changes here. You would almost have the same map that you have now. So I'm trying to give you another look and another scenario. But let me add something I found. During the de-annexation, I want to put this on the record. There are some issues with blocks being split. You can split precincts. There are some things that are of issue that didn't really affect the maps that I'm presenting, but I just want to go on the record as saying that some of the changes, I had to work around a lot of stuff, and Attorney Wade could probably deal with this. I just want to go on the record of that as far as when we talk about population numbers and et cetera, okay?
Okay, so essentially, you did that just to give us something different, not because you think this has a reason to occur.
No, because I had maybe 3 or 4 different iterations, and this was one of the last ones. This was kind of more of a compromise. The previous ones I showed you that I was supposed to bring today that we didn't finish did something a little different, one of them, and the other one did something else a little different. So I'm just giving you a different look.
Okay, so
obviously the numbers change here and there, but there isn't really no agenda in this, because when you're trying to, in order to reach into Midtown, to pick Midtown up, you got to pick up precincts along the way. And so it is what it is, unless you split blocks or something like that, and you still have to move around.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Warren. You also, I want to first give a just thank you to the full council for approving this process. Councilwoman Logan, hold on. Approving this process, but also allowing our community members to be engaged and involved alongside with us. I think we're all, this has been a big learning experience for all, and still an inquisitive path as we look at redistricting here in our counties, in our school districts, in our state. And a big thank you to the volunteerism and efforts of Dr. D. Harris as well. He joked with us saying if he would have known what it was, he wouldn't have did it, but I think his heart would have led him there. Can we, please, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you. And so just an applause to everyone, no matter where we go, just the principle of this process and being engaged in it is one that I think just shows the effort towards transparency and the look towards collaboration on things that are very impactful to our city for decades to come. Since we have 12 redistricting committee members and a quorum is 13, Councilwoman Robinson is online, but as we learned in Wade's opinion, online votes don't count. So Smiley, I'm gonna ask for you to come to a mic somewhere so that you can make a vote. But I'm going to, I guess we don't need, but yeah, just be at a mic for the sentence. I'm just gonna move that we send this to the April 5th special call meeting by Chairman Jones with no recommendation for the reason of lack of quorum due to the due to the member we have online that can't be counted now as they would have been during COVID-19. So I want to make sure that that's on record as well. So our special call meeting is April 5th for council members, and we invite the community. Thank you, community, for being involved and engaged with as well as city mapping. And that is at 4 o'clock on April 5th, next Wednesday. City Hall will be closed on April 4th for commemoration of the assassination of Dr. King. But I do want April 5th on our calendars. So we have without objection. All right. And then also thank you to our community subcommittee. They have 3 community meetings. We have April 1st at Whitehaven Library, Wednesday, April 5th at St. John's United. So we'll be doing double duty that day. And then Saturday, April 8th at Burt Ferguson Community Center in Cordova. So this information will be blasted out so that everyone can get it, share with your constituents and your listservs. Any final business before I'm trying not to lose everybody at the same time. Any final business, new, old business? Okay. Thank you to our community members. Thank you to my council colleagues. And I hope to see everyone on the council. Get your folks here, April 5th. At least 7 of y'all, maybe 8, on April the 5th. Yeah. All right. And if you have a chance this Saturday, come join our communication subcommittee at the Whitehaven Library on Mill Branch Road. All right. With that, no other business. I call this meeting adjourned.